At the moment, I'm kind of just recovering from a little bit of travel stress, a little bit of jet lag. I came back from. I mean, I should be recovered. I came back from Europe a little over a week ago, so I should be recovered. I'm getting back into my training again. That's probably something that is a must for me. I've got to do the work, just as much physically as mentally.
What is the city or country that you like the most traveling?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, look, there's different ones for different reasons, right? So if I go to Barcelona, then that's special for a reason. If I go to San Sebastian, that's special for a different reason. I mean, New York City is pretty hard to go past. It's just a completely different place from anywhere else you go, and it really is the city that never sleeps. So I don't know if I could live there, but I definitely like visiting.
Yeah, only to pass by, like a tourist.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there's so much to do. I've been there so many times, and I always leave there going, oh, I didn't do this or I didn't do that, but my time there was really full. So it's not as though I was sitting in the hotel room twiddling my thumbs. I was out doing stuff. There's just so much to do.
You must make me remember when I went in vacation with my girlfriend to Venezia in Italy, and we thought how the Venezia people can live here with all the tourists all the time, all day, all year. My city is completely full of tourists. How can you live like that?
Yeah. Well, look, it's in New York. I don't know that they're really friendly people, but they just go about their business. They don't, they've got their music or they're on their phone and they just do what they're doing. As long as you don't interrupt them doing what they're doing, everyone's happy. But I always find them really friendly. They're always pretty helpful for this lost Aussie.
And where have you been in this last trip that you have in Europe, right?
Yeah, I started in England and then went to Sweden, Finland, the Netherlands, and Germany. Finished in Germany. So I was in Germany for Oktoberfest.
And talking about what the train hard and smart, like that topic that you have that I totally agree on.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Can you elaborate on that so everybody can understand that thing?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, everyone's probably heard of the statement, "I'm not training harder, I'm training smarter." Everyone's heard of that one, but it the way that comes out, it implies that you can't be training smart and hard at the same time, and of course you can. And the more I look into it, training harder is training smarter. So how do you cope with stress? Well, you can run from it and never go anywhere near stress, or you can push towards it, and the more you push towards it, the better you are at coping with it. And exercise training is just a type of stress. So how are you going to cope with that training? Well, I'll push towards it. Now, training harder doesn't mean just throwing load indiscriminately at our athletes, just creating fatigue for the sake of it. That's not what I mean by training harder. What I mean is build chronic load, build your high speed running load, build your strength, build your training tolerance, so that you're better able to cope with the demands of whatever activity you have to do in your life.
Yeah, I mean, basic as it is, progressive overload. Sometimes it's difficult because, for example, in team sports competition, the schedule is craziness and it's getting crazier every year, and it's hard to compete. To compete is easy, but to put the emphasis on progressive overload is difficult when you have 2, 3, 4 games in a week, you know. So do you know how to handle these tough calendars that we have and the density of the competition during team sports? How can you handle that?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's a couple of things. We talk about progressive overload, and the reason we talk about progressive overload is really about capacity. What we're trying to do is improve capacity, and one way to do that is through progressively loading your athletes and progressively overloading them.
Mhm.
But if you're in a situation where you're playing 3 or 4 games in a week, then it's do your best. You're not going to be able to progressively overload your athletes, or if you've found a way, I'd be keeping it to yourself, because you'll make $1 million out of it. But you've got to be thinking, if you're thinking capacity, then and you can't overload your athletes, then how are you going to maintain or improve capacity? You still want to maintain or improve capacity. Well, then you start thinking, can we prop up capacity in the back end? If we can't front end it with load, if we can't overload, then can we think about health factors that will prop up capacity? So can we minimize stress? Can we optimize sleep? Can we optimize hydration and nutrition? And we're trying to push forward on the health factors to improve capacity.
Mhm.
That's really, when you're in those situations, you can't train more. So you've just got, but you still want to improve capacity. You still want to go out and play at the best capacity you can. You don't want to be so fatigued that you can't play. That's the way to do it.
And what did you learn? Because you travel a lot and you see so many different cultures about training smart and training hard. For example, Chinese culture is one of those that you have to train hard, and hard means a lot of hours to put in, and it doesn't really care about muscle soreness, and you have to do this 1,000 times. Do you know? So what difference are there in the training workload, depending on the cultures that we have? You know, what do you learn from them?
Oh, look, there's so many, different nationalities have a different approach to training, and you know, China and Russia are really good examples of, you know, one more rather than one less. And you're right, but when you're dealing with massive populations, if that athlete breaks, then they've got another athlete who's at a pretty good standard themselves.
That's a good point.
They could, they could probably come and win the gold medal themselves. They just come up and take their place. Now, if you're comparing that with Australia, we have a population of 30 million compared to, let's say, 300 million in the States. It's the difference in population is just too much, and we just can't get another elite athlete to take that one's place.
They have that kind of filter players or athletes, you know, in some way.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just train them until they break, and then think that everything's going to be okay and that performance will be fine. So, there's differences between countries, but there's also differences between sports as well. So, a good example is the rugby codes. Rugby league in Australia, which is on the East Coast predominantly, is a very tough sport, and they train really hard because it's such a tough sport. When you talk about strength training for that sport, and you talk to, say, a football person, a soccer person about strength training, depending on the team, they will tell you that their strength work is done on the pitch in small-sided games. And then so it's a different type of, you're almost talking about, you're having two different conversations.
Yeah.
So particularly when we're talking about guys who are lifting massive weights for 1 or 2 reps compared to, holding someone off in a small-sided game. It's a different type of strength work, not really what you'd consider strength work in the rugby world. So that kind of thing, you have to make sure that you're understanding each other when you're having the conversation. Are we actually talking about the same thing? So that takes a little time to make sure that we're if we come from completely different worlds where hard training means something for one person and means something different for the other, or the terminology we use in the difference across different sports could mean different things to different people. So you have to take the time to actually listen to what that person is saying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think language is really important, because you cannot put all your knowledge and all your experience in some words, because words are noise that you can hear and you can interpret. So it's really different. I understand completely what you're saying, that in different sports, different languages, different contexts, and even in the same sport, different teams, different cultures, different coaches. It's tricky to have those players to buy in your culture too, because they come from another countries. It's a tough one, team sports. I wanted to talk about too the training load. So to make a debate out of it that is not maybe usual. For example, let's put a person that finished her PhD, for example, about training now, and you are the coach, right? So he says, okay, Tim, your practice today has to be 28 minutes, and you have to do small side games, and today we have to do this amount of training load because tomorrow we have a game, and this is what you're supposed to do, right? Because the science says so.
Yes, okay.
But then there is so many things that the coach, for example, don't see the drills right, because they're not doing the patterns smoothly, or I'm talking about this skill in particular that we need to be effective in the game against these kind of players, or this kind of defense in the pick and roll in basketball has to be like this, and I don't care about 28 minutes. If we have to make 32 to make it right, let's do it. So what is that balance that you have to move into what you have to do about the amount of workload that you do that day versus what you have in the court, in the field, what you feel about the players and the team,
Yeah, well, look, it is a balance. I don't know whether it's as fine a line as what we've been led to believe. Certainly not in team sport athletes. I think team sport athletes are a little different from endurance athletes, individual sport athletes
or Olympic athletes that they have 4 years to prepare.
Yeah. Look, they're training so much closer to the ceiling than what team sport athletes are. I think in general, the gap between where team sport athletes train and where they could train it's pretty large. I don't think the majority of team sport athletes train anywhere near as hard as they could. So, and that's I only say that because I've seen it in so many other sports. When you actually do train hard, the gap between what you think you're doing is hard and what is actually hard is quite large. But in general, I would say, if the coach knows what they're doing, if you've got an experienced coach, then let them do their work. Let them get their work done, because they're already computing where the athlete is in terms of how they're coping with the load, how tired they are. They're seeing things through body language and through the conversations that they're having, and they'll probably feel the tiredness in the room, in the change rooms. They'll feel it. before anything comes up in anything we measure. It's an intuition that the experts have that, and you'll know it yourself when you go into a club. If there's a problem with that club, you can smell it. You can smell that problem before you even know what it is. You just know something's not right. So I would, in general, I would say you got to get your work done, because if that's not right, and then there's a whole heap of other things that come on the back of it. So there's the confidence from the coaching group. There's the confidence from the players. There's the actual, well, can we do it? You want to have some evidence that you can run these plays and run these formations well and smoothly. The big thing I would say, though, is that if you're so focused on minutes and you're so focused on stopping players at this imaginary threshold or managing them away from load, then what is the real message that you're sending to the coach?
Right.
What is the real message that the players are receiving? And the message is, if I do too much, I'm going to break. I'm fragile. I'm vulnerable. That's the last thing we want our players to hear. We want our players to be feeling bulletproof. We want our players to feel that they can go into battle and they can go into double, triple extra time. And that they come out on top. So my philosophy has always been that my athletes are more robust than they think. They're more resilient than we give them credit for, and focus on a good program. If we get the programming right, we don't have to worry about the minutes restrictions.
One thing that I think is missing, or we don't do it a lot, is to teach and educate players how to monitorize themselves during the drills. Because veterans, they always will be doing this. But the younger, they want to go hard, they want to go 100% or 110%. But sometimes, in the game, you have to adjust and you have to be resting a little bit, because this is not as important as the veterans can do that so well, or smart players or athletes. So I think that is missing, some time to educate the athletes how to manage their energy during the drills, because 28 minutes for one guy is not the same for the other one. So we have to teach them that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's it's really easy just to go, I'm going to go 100 miles an hour, and then you blow up in the first minute, and then you're ineffective for the next 5. Whereas you're much better off at particularly in team sports. You see it all the time. The smart players, and I've seen it when we did time motion analysis of our women's football team. This is going back a while, but generally the team had a work to rest ratio of around 1 to 10. So, for every 2 seconds of work, 20 seconds of lower intensity activity. And we had one player who had a work to rest ratio of 1 to 40. So 2 seconds of work, 80 seconds of rest. And the coach said to me, "Oh, so what do you think? Is she lazy?" And I said, No, she's just really smart. Instead of scrambling and not reading things, she reads the play so well that she just takes a gentle walking step in the direction she has to go, so that she's already read how the play's unfolding down the field. She's that smart. She just manages the game. The game isn't impacting her. She manages the game the way she wants it to play. And she's smart. She doesn't work any harder than she has to. And there's players back home here where they have GPS on them, and they have who's the fastest NRL player, and a lot of our guys are competing, and they asked this one guy who is drop dead fast, are you worried that this guy's faster than you? And he just laughed and he said, "No, I only run as fast as I have to." You know, like
That's a good response.
yeah, so why? I mean, that's just smart team sport athletes. They're so good at this skill. They don't use any more energy or any more movements than they have to. They're efficient in their movements. They don't do anything more than they have to get the job done. Now, you can't necessarily have a team full of those. You still need the players in your team who are the workers, who, you know, they contribute to the team just through work rate. They may not be the smartest, but you know that if there's a through pass, they're going to be on the ball or in position because they're going the whole time, and that they contribute to the team, but they just contribute in other ways.
What is your favorite sport? Rugby.
Well, I grew up on rugby league. So where I grew up on the east coast of Australia, that was the main winter sport, and my dad was before it was called strength and conditioning coach. He was the conditioner or the trainer for a lot of rugby league teams. I used to follow him around as a kid. So you know, I've just been around it my whole life. So yeah, but I like you know, I love football when I go over to Europe. I love ice hockey when I go to North America. Yeah, so there's different sports that I really get into.
All right. So, for example, in rugby, you have to choose between one and another. Okay, you have two twins, completely the same person, but one is smarter than the other one, and the other one, he has more athleticism. So you have to choose between same skill, same person, but one is smarter and the other one has more athleticism. What do you choose in rugby, for example?
Yeah, look, in rugby, it's a bit different because you can be really successful if you're well developed physically. So you don't have to be the most skillful, but if you
it depends on the position, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's right. If you take one of the forwards, then you could go with a more athletic player. They don't have to be as skilled. But if you take one of the ball players, one of the halves, then skill. You know, I want them to be skilled. Now, if you said the same question for football, then I might take a more skillful player, because I think in general football is so much more technical than rugby. So having those skills and having them from a very early age, I think helps. Yeah.
Again, it depends on the sport. I know the question
was
not smart. It's not a smart question, but I want you to,
that's a good question. I
like
like
a position. Yeah. I want to know what you think about this because I have an example of today. Yesterday, our team, I am the strength and conditioning coach in a basketball women's team. And yesterday we won the Super Cup here in Spain.
Nice.
So the coaches, the coaching staff, medical staff, and I, we have decided that today was a resting day. It's a match day +1, only recovery, so only treatments, and who wants to come here and do some treatment, so you're welcome, but it's not mandatory. The whole team came, some of them to work out in the gym, strength and conditioning wise, and one player, the MVP, which it was a WNBA semi-finalist. She was the MVP from last season in the Spanish league, so she's an amazing player. She wanted to do one-on-ones. So that's, you know, something like the coaching staff is saying today is a rest day, but the players think otherwise. And you adjust and you share and you say, okay, this is what you need. I'm here for you. So it's another example that you can plan weeks and weeks, but it doesn't matter. It will change in 8 hours. And let me put some context because they travel from San Sebastian or so to here 8 hours. They came here 8 a.m. they sleep a little, and at 4 p.m. they went here too. So it's not usual here in Spain that you do that, So what do you think about that example? Like, you plan something, but then the players come to you and say, "Hey, no, I want to work out."
If they're coming to you looking for work, then I think that's outstanding. Like,
that's wonderful. Yeah,
you've got a group of athletes on your hands, and a group of players, a group of competitors who want to get better. Now, if they're coming to you because the training's too easy, and they're saying we need more work, we're not fit enough, that's a different problem. But if they've just won a comp, some championship, they've won a championship, and then they turn around and say we're ready to get back to work.
That's amazing.
That sounds to me like you've got a group of hungry athletes, and there's no better place in the world to be in sport when you've got that. When you've got a group of people who are working hard, they're galvanized by the fact they're working hard, and that's where you get to achieve special things. Yeah, there's no better place than that.
I was surprised. I'm not kidding. But think the opposite. Imagine that we decided to make the day off, but that some players has to come because they need to adjust body composition, because they need to work on upper body strength, X and O's. So what is your approach on those players? Do you talk with them privately? Do you suggest? Do you make it mandatory? What is your approach there?
Well, I guess it varies from player to player, but in most of our sports, we have a culture where it's next person up, next man, next woman up. So if injuries happen all the time in team sports, they're just one of those things that happen. So if you're in a position and the number one player goes down and you're the next person up, we create a mindset and a mentality within our group that we're as strong as our weakest, right? So you may not be as good a player as the number one player, but we want to make sure that when you go in, when you have to fill that void, that you can do the job and you can do it effectively, and you're not going to let anyone down. So that means making sure that you fix as many chinks in the armor as you can. You're trying to anything that's limiting your performance, whether it be skill or whether it be physical, you're trying to improve those qualities. You may not be as good as the number one player, but all we want you to be is the best version of yourself you can be. Get as much out of yourself as you can, and that requires making sure that where you've got little holes in your game, little gaps in your game, or soft spots, we're trying to harden them up. We're trying to strengthen them up, and we make it a positive thing. That you're part of this deal. You're not like a reserve or a substitute player. We're one squad. We're one team, and when there might be, let's say, 17 players that play in a game, and then there's 8 reserves or 8 that don't play, non-starters. No, there's actually 25 of us, and that's our squad. So there's 25 of us that we've got to lift the standard right across the board. If we're as strong as our weakest, then all we need is one person in that 25 to not be at an appropriate standard. And the rest of them don't drag him up. He drags them down. All we need is that player to miss assignment on one occasion, and the whole rest of the team suffers. So it's all about making a contribution to the team. You're a part of this team, and you've got to make sure that you're as strong as possible in every area you can be, so that when it's your turn, you're ready to go.
Exactly. It's like investing time on yourself. So maybe it's not your time right now because your role is different, but you have to work every day to make that happen. Maybe not today, but to be prepared for the next contract or the next team or the next season or the next game, because something can happen, like an injury or something. So that's a really good point. Should we talk about prevention or not? Because it's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, we can.
So how can we start talking about injury preventions?
Well, look, I think people get themselves worked up over the term prevention. So if you put an injury prevention, and I put that in inverted commas there, you put an injury prevention program in place. How do you know that you prevented an injury that didn't happen, right? And people go around and around with this argument. Look, to me, it doesn't really make much difference whether we use the word injury reduction or injury risk reduction, or all we're trying to do is injury prevention programs. For me, are like we're trying to. It's just training that we're putting around our players. So we could think of, let's say, a Nordic hamstring exercise, which may or may not reduce hamstring injuries. It may or may not have an effect on performance, but it's local tissue loading. I think most of us would agree that it's loading the local tissue. And if you have stronger hamstrings, longer length fascicles, then you're probably in a better position to sprint, and you're probably in a better position to handle the demands of sprinting. Now, that doesn't mean that all you do is local tissue loading. You still do sport-specific loading, which to me is also performance enhancing and potentially you have the opportunity to reduce injury risk. The good programs, I think, and these are just training programs. You don't have to actually have to call them injury prevention programs. They're just training programs. You're trying to set a good foundation of local tissue health, and on top of that, you're layering sport specific loading or sport specific capacity. And when you've got those two, it puts you in a better position to handle the demands of the sport. So whether we can reduce injuries or not, I mean, injuries are increasing across sports. Maybe it's just the demands of the sport are so great.
The demands and the schedule, for sure.
So it's pretty hard to stop the injuries. But if you think at how much we're playing now, players are asked to compete, and the number of injuries they're getting, maybe actually the injury rate is going down. They're getting fewer injuries per number of games they're playing. So that's a different way of looking at it.
Because teams have more play in team sports. They tend to have more players than years before, So the ratio should increase because you have more players.
Yeah.
Maybe in rugby, it's impossible to not have an injury player. You have so many people. It's impossible.
Well, there's, after the first game of the season, there's not a single player who isn't injured, who's not, or at least not playing hurt. After game one, you've got to go out and play hurt all the time.
You will ask yourself, why nobody's injured? Something's wrong. Somebody is not going hard.
Yeah. Well, we've had that conversation with coaches where I've been in a staff meeting, and our head of performance, said something on the lines of, everyone's healthy. We've got 100% availability, and this is in pre-season. We're all ready. Everyone's ready to train. And the coach said, "Well, that's no good." And the head of performance says, "Why?" And he said, "Well, if if everyone's available and everyone's 100% healthy, then we're not training hard enough. Then, right. Because what you're essentially doing is catering for the lowest common denominator, the most unfit and least athletic in your group. If he's coping with the load, then imagine how easy it is for the number one guy. So yeah, it's different
that
mentality.
Sounds fair. That sounds fair for sure.
Yeah, I agree with it.
I agree too. Of course, I don't want to get anybody injured, but I understand that you cannot go to an important game 100% fresh. No. You just cannot. You have to train and you have to prepare for competitiveness, to toughness, to fatigue, mental toughness, and you have to be prepared. You don't have to be 100%. I totally agree that, but you will depend on the team as a whole, not as a group of individuals. So you explained that perfectly. I always make this question for every interviewer that I have. So, and you have a lot of experience and you travel a lot and you see a lot of things. Can you share with us a story, a mistake that you make, something crazy that happened to you? Anything that you when you were there, you were like, oh my God, is this really happening?
Oh, well, like I keep talking about how I need to write a book about some of these stories.
Bestseller for sure.
Yeah, look, everyone's writing sports science books. I'd like to write a book about what actually happens. Behind the closed doors, revealed behind the curtain of sport. Look, I've seen lots of different examples. I've seen people in team sports in high performance roles making the mistake that they thought the staff worked for them. Head of high performance, and the rest of the staff don't work for the high performance manager. His role is to bring the group together, and galvanize the group and get them working hard for the team. That's without the team, we don't exist, or without the player, we don't exist. There's no need for any of us. Look, I'm just trying to. There's been so many funny things that have happened on trips. Some of them are, like I can't repeat them because they're. It's like if this is a PG audience.
You can say anything you want, Tim.
Right.
This is free world.
I'll tell you. One time I was, and this is. Like, I'll apologize in advance if anyone gets upset by this, but this is the kind of thing that happens sometimes, right? So, I was with a team, and I was talking about load and how if you increase load too quickly, that might be a problem. But you don't want to drop load too quickly either, because then you've got to kind of manage your way out of that. And these guys, these coaching staff were kind of giggling, and I was looking at them and I'm going, well, what's so funny? And it was in the States, and they said, what you got to realize, Tim, is that over here, load can mean ejaculatory load. And I've gone, like, I've almost like fallen off my chair. I'm going, are you guys for real? Like, it's like, I'm going, yeah. I get it. I understand. I understand what the connotations of load, but like, really, like this. I've just flown a long way to come and talk to you guys, and that's what you've got. This is elite sport. Anyway, so that there's those
so
examples, but there's a lot of really good ones too, right? Like things when I look back on, I'll document them, and I'll maybe
I will buy that book for sure. you tell me, send me an email. Hey, it's on.
I'll come back on your show with a few more PG versions of. But yeah, when he said it, I'm just going. I shook my head and I'm going, get me out of here.
Oh my God. Okay, let me make two more questions and we're done. Okay, we talk about so much about the functions of the job of the strength and conditioning coach, and I think nowadays we have so many things to do, and we are paying attention in so many things, avoiding the ABC, the basics. That hey, yeah, the data analysis is good, but you have to pay attention on training, on program designing. So pay attention on that, and if you have time enough to make that data analysis, do it. But if you are on yourself, pay attention on ABC. What is that for you, Tim? Don't forget these pillars of the strength and conditioning coach jobs or functions.
Yeah, you're right. Look, to me, and I can give you an example of this. I was employed by a team, and before I took the role as conditioning coach, they said to me, "What you need to realize is we've just been thrown out of our high performance facility." And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and I said, "Well, that's okay. It's just a building to me. That doesn't mean anything." And they said, "Well, we've got no resources or staff." And I kind of thought about it, and I thought, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And they said, "Oh, we've got no money. We've also got no money." And I'm going, geez, like, okay, how am I going to do this job where I've had all of these resources and all of the toys to play with? And then this calmness came over me. It was like, well, how did I used to do it before I had all of those things? And all I had was a stopwatch. I had I had a gym, or I had some markings on the field, and I had a group of players who were hungry to get better, and I needed to get to know my players. So for me, the relationship part is key. I need to find out what makes each of my athletes tick, and what lights them up, because I could work with that then. And I need to think through a good program. How am I going to schedule this week to make sure that I've got some really high intensity sessions in there, but I am building in some low days as well, so that we're getting the recovery to go back and do the hard days again. That to me is, and my philosophy has changed a little bit over time. That to me is probably number one. It's far, the analysis is important, but if I had to let something go, then probably now I'm more inclined to trust my eyes than to have to depend on a number, to rely on a number to tell me what my eyes are seeing. And maybe in the early days I needed the numbers as they're almost like a crutch, but I needed them for support to reinforce what I thought I was seeing. But I think now I'm probably more inclined to look at my players and get a feel for things from my players. So I could do without the numbers if I needed to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The last question, Tim, is I'm not sure if you know, but I think you are, that so many, I will talk about Spain, okay? That so many strength and conditioning coaches are using the acute chronic workload ratio on the daily basis. So what you hear about that, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think if they're looking to progress load and relative to someone's capacity, That's the beauty of the acute chronic ratio is that you're loading relative to capacity rather than just taking 10% increase or whatever per week. If you're trying to be sensible about your loading and trying to keep your changes in load, either increases or decreases, relatively small, and trying to maintain or build in the right direction, it's a pretty useful tool for that kind of thing. I mean, like any method, it's got limitations. So it's not going to be the holy grail, and it's not going to be all things to all people. But I think it's great. It's being used. I guess the strength of it is its simplicity. And if it wasn't useful, then there wouldn't be so many people all around the world. So, but in saying that, it's I'm the first to admit that that it does have limitations, and you can't just interpret that on its own. It's one piece of a big puzzle that we're all trying to work out the puzzle every day, and that's one piece of the puzzle. But if people are seeing value in it, if they can see that it's actually improving the way they go about things, then by all means go ahead and use it. I think that's great.
It's really useful because it's simple and it gives you the data to progress with common sense, and I think it's great. I forgot. The last question is not that one. The last question is, Tim, what would you say to the 20-year-old Tim Gabbett?
Probably
keep going.
Probably, just don't worry so much. Don't think too much. Just things will be okay. Just I probably spent a lot of time thinking about things and worrying about things that may never happen. And I put a lot of thought into, and that was just, I was always a bit of a thinker growing up. And that can be a strength, obviously. Like if you think a lot, and you think about thinking, then you get pretty good at thinking, right? So that can be a strength, which has helped me in my job. But probably now I've learned just to not worry about things. Don't what people say or think about me. I couldn't care less. I'm much more. I know who I am. I know what I stand for, and the people who really know me, the athletes I work with, and my really good friends, they know what I stand for as well, and they know who I am. So that to me gives me a lot of confidence. Just to go about, not like I can achieve anything or anything like that. It's just people who matter to me, that I know that they're right there behind me, and they know that what they're going to get from me as well. So that's probably what I would. I mean, it's a roundabout way of saying where am I now compared to where I was when I was 20, but that's kind of how I feel. I feel a lot more comfortable in my own skin, and I'm not so worried about trying to establish myself or anything like that. So if I was given advice to someone, is just be yourself. Don't worry about things that may never happen. Just keep working hard, and the harder you work, the easier it gets. Things work out for you if you're a good person and you work towards helping people. You do things the right way, things work out for you.
I made a lot of podcasts in this podcast, interviewing a lot of people, and And nobody gave this advice. This is a new one, and it's tough because it's been 3 years and a half. And I think it's important because you make me remember that I don't know who said it, but he said, we spend most of the time fearing something that will never happen. And that's so true. And you explain it so perfectly. So I think that's a great advice for the young people that they are starting in this job or any job. Just focus on the things that you want to achieve, and don't worry about what is this guy doing, because we couldn't care less, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Like at the end of the day, you know, when we've got a minute's worth of breath left in us, the last thing we're going to be thinking about is what some
What the other
joker
people is saying, yeah.
what some joker said about us. All we're going to be thinking about is the people that we've loved in our life, and that's what's going to be in our minds, I reckon.
That's right. That's right. So, Tim, let me tell you again what a pleasure it's been for me personally, and for all of the strength and conditioning coaches that are listening. So thank you for your time. I know you have some of jet lag, so thank you for your time and the effort too. So please get some rest. The sleeping is number one always, and then comes all the rest. So Tim, please finish this interview yourself.
Yeah, well, look, thanks, Alex. I've really enjoyed this one too, because it's a little bit different from the others in that, you know, a lot of people focus on the stuff we do, rather than the people, you know. So to me, having a chat with you and getting to know you a little better on a personal level, rather than just focus on the work, because the work is pretty similar from person to person.
Yeah.
So yeah,
but we train harder, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We train harder.
So, some people train harder than others. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, it's been a pleasure. Tim, please take care. Okay.
Thanks, Alex.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.